It's time for Facts Are Your Friends. There we go. All right, today we are talking murder podcast. Kelly's favorite. Our true crime, murder podcast, all these shows. Is it psychologically healthy? That's what we're talking about today. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to make everybody mad. So as the great T Swift says, shake it off already. So here we go. We have a culture that is obsessed with true crime, particularly women. Obsessed with true crime. Kelly is smiling as though I'm speaking directly into her soul. Correct?
I feel very seen right now. Let's just go with that.
Now, we've always had true crime stories told orally about gods and monsters and quote-unquote others, right? True crime stories and storytelling in general has been wired into us. We are storytelling and story-making beings. It's how humans communicate, have always communicated. We tell stories. Story is how we make sense of the world, and it's how we participate in the world. It's how we experience things without actually sleeping with a neighbor, without actually dying, without actually being in a car wreck, without actually whatever, is through story. Somebody tells us a story. This thing happened. We watch a movie. We get to see it happen, but we don't have to actually experience the full weight of that tragedy or that, but we get to kind of participate when he hits the winning home run or when Rocky comes back in Rocky IV and wins or whatever. We get to be a bystander. This is how we are wired. And then modern media hits the scene and we are captivated by serial killers, murder, Freddy Krueger, Alfred Hitchcock, all the stuff, right? And it taps into a very natural, a very wired into us survival instinct, which is to always be looking for threats, to identify threats, to see them, to be able to predict ahead of time what they might do, what you might do. This is what makes humans humans. This is the frontal lobe, right? This is being able to say, okay, if X happens and Y happens, then I'm going to do Z, right? So it kept us alive because we couldn't fight bears, but we could anticipate bears. We could strategize about bears. And then in recent years, with the proliferation of true crime shows, Alfred Hitchcock, Twilight Zone, War of the Worlds, and then Ted Bundy, and then NYPD Blue, CSI, NCIS, Silence of the Lambs, Cops, Law and Order. The line between true crime, fiction, the unknown, the dark forces, and your neighbor who looks nice but might actually be luring old people over to eat them and skin them alive and use their skin as a dress, it all is getting blurred together. And fantasy and fiction and reality and your neighbors and your coworkers, it's all turning into the same river, right? All these different creeks and tributaries are dumping into the same river. And then podcast hits the scene. And the internet opens up a never-before trove of interviews, insights, police files, interviews with detectives. My dad got flown. My dad's a homicide detective for years and was a SWAT hostage negotiator. Nancy Grace flew my old man to New York and to do a cold case. And when Nancy Grace's producers called my dad, like, hey, do you remember this crime? And he goes, yeah, that one still haunts me. They flew him to New York and he was on the show, right? It was awesome. True crime has become braided together with celebrity culture and our ability to participate in a ringside seat to what happened. So think about when Ted Bundy was on the scene. There would be a news article at 6 and then again at 9 and then a newspaper. Well, now suddenly there's troves of Ted Bundy movies, Ted Bundy interviews, Ted Bundy poetry. We can read it all. We can look at his pictures. We can read all the transcripts of the conversations he had with police officers. We got it all, right? And it's the ultimate rubbernecking. And it's messing with us in ways we have not fully metabolized yet. So make no mistake. I will go to the mat with any neuroscientist on the planet, any social scientist on the planet. The media you consume affects you. It affects the way you see the world, the way you experience the world, and the way your body reacts to the world. There's a great book by Dawn Cecil. It's called Fear, Justice, and Modern True Crime. And Dawn writes, by connecting facts from the real world with a fictional style narrative format, true crime stories naturally blur the line between news and entertainment. The melding of facts and entertainment is commonly referred to as infotainment. If you're a true crime junkie or a murder podcast junkie, like, I don't know, Kelly and Jenna and their friends, you are being entertained by the death, murder, investigation of something that really happened, packaged in an entertaining way. That's crazy. And I think, Kelly, tell me if I'm wrong. I think the first podcast, it was Serial. Was that the first one that kind of set all this off?
Yeah, probably so. That was the big one that kind of kicked off the podcast.
So I met
world.
Sarah Koenig, and like going down, like that felt, and I haven't kept up with it in all the other seasons, but I remember her. She came and met with my law students and did a great presentation. But it sounded very altruistic. Like she had a question and kept asking. Very journalistic endeavor into this thing.
I think so, yeah. Now, there was other podcasts, I believe, before that were kind of one-offs, but hers was the first one where you're telling a story in a 10-week arc or whatever. But, yeah, hers started off with the story that she had heard about this guy, and it was like, I don't think he's guilty. And then it just goes from there.
But it's the music swells, and then the wait till next week. It like uses the best parts of Alfred Hitchcock and the best parts of like Friends, and then a real murder, and it braids it all together. And we're like, then what happened? And then there's that little bit of, could this happen in my town? Right? In my neighborhood? Maybe? Allegedly? Right? That's my favorite, allegedly. And then I remember being so bummed out by S-Town. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, that was one county over from where my husband's from.
So that explains so much.
Yes, it does.
About where you went manhunting. But listen, here's what was so frustrating about that. I waited through that entire podcast and I got to the end and they explained it. And it could have been a 60-minute. This guy was doing this particular thing. I think it was smelting or whatever he was doing. And it affected his brain chemistry.
Right. And he was mad. He was
brilliant.
crazy. Yeah.
But that's not how they told it. They kept me hooked for...
Oh, I'd say one with that one. I kept waiting for like there was going to be this big thing. And yeah, there really wasn't.
Oh, man. Okay, so why do we consume this madness? Why do we do this? Some experts say we consume these shows as a way of quote-unquote learning or mentally rehearsing what we would do. So it's about preparation. It's a dress rehearsal. So we watch Silence of the Lambs, or we watch even... And I know this isn't true crime, but for a lot of adolescent males, it kind of is. Like the John Wick movies. Okay, so this is what I would do. I'm going to bury all these rad weapons under my concrete floor and then chip it out with a sledgehammer and then ride a horse with a sword down the subway. It all gets mushed together here. Or like if Hannibal Lecter comes to my house. Okay, I'm going to... Number one, you're not going to do anything. But, so it's about preparation. It's a dress rehearsal. Number two, we consume these shows, as I said earlier, as a way of participating, pretending to get inside the head of a murderer or a detective or a victim's family without getting blood on our hands. It's the ultimate voyeuristic activity when it's consumed in a podcast. It can be super powerful because, get this, your brain creates the art, the actual pictures in your mind from the words of the show. The cognitive work that goes into the imagination can be very, very powerful because your brain draws from what it already knows. And so when it says things like, and the neighbor had a shifty look about him, your brain will go looking for your neighbors. It's different than a movie, because in a movie, you see Robert Englund playing Freddy Krueger, and it's like, oh, I got a picture of Freddy Krueger. Not so with a podcast. With a podcast, your brain has to carry the cognitive load of the story. It inserts people from your past. Remember that coach? Yeah, that coach was a little bit sketchy. He might eat children. And it begins to craft this narrative around people you know. And I'm looking at Kelly and she's like, oh, I feel exposed.
A little bit on that one, but not totally, because I don't...
You do?
I don't see people like in my world where I start thinking about that. Now,
But you don't think about it, but does your body? And I realized I said that in kind of the creepiest way possible.
Thanks, John Mayer.
But does your body? I said that's so gross.
I don't know. Now, Jenna says that she does the like how I would handle myself in this situation, and I don't do that, but she says she does.
Yeah, I think I more so started listening to them when I moved to Nashville from my home, because I was like, okay, I am a 18-year-old woman moving to a new city, and one, I'm intrigued by like the cycle, like why do they do that? Like what makes them want to do that? But also, okay, what can I learn from these stories of like, okay, here's what not to do as a young woman living on her own in a new city.
So you listen to these as like research.
Kind of. I mean, like I know I'm never going to wear
So
my hair
terrible.
in a ponytail when I go to the grocery store because they'll grab me from the back. You'll never catch me doing that.
Oh,
Yeah, things
boy.
like that.
Incredible. All right. So this is the reason why in education, why we ask kids to figure things out, because it develops new cognitive maps instead of just presenting it to them in a picture or form. All right. So number 3, some experts put out there that people listen to murder podcasts obsessively because they need to see good triumph over evil. With all the mayhem and madness out in the world, it lets us believe a little bit of good overcomes. Except, I'll say this, every podcast I've ever listened to, good never wins. It never ends well.
Yeah, I don't see, I mean,
I don't buy that argument, but
I don't
maybe
either.
others do.
No, I don't, because I know that even when I listen to different podcasts, I have to take a break from them. I have to detox because your brain gets kind of too into that, and there's all of a sudden you can't find good. Because even if, yes, they catch the person,
There's still somebody murdered.
there's still probably multiple people, and there's still this, what is wrong with our brains? What's wrong with people? So no, I don't buy that as an argument.
All right, so here's what we need to sit on. Cecil says that consumers of true crime are being exposed to a distorted picture of criminal behavior and justice. So in a true crime, I've walked into homes where there are, unfortunately, people who have passed away, who have died violent deaths. There is no music swelling. There's no like loud piano and symphony that comes. There's no ticking clocks or dramatic pauses. It's this weight in the silence that I can't explain unless you've been in there. I've been in active shooter exercises. I've been in a building with an active shooter on the campus. It is not like it is on a TV show. It's very, very different. There's a level of haunting that is unique, and it is weighty in a way that I can only explain if you've been there. It's why police officers often hang out with other police officers, because there's a shared weight that they just carry because they know what goes on in the homes in their neighborhood in the middle of the night that regular neighbors don't know. And so when you consume podcast as infotainment, when you consume murder and investigations and police work and bad guys and good guys as infotainment, it distorts reality in a pretty profound way. It also decreases confidence in the criminal justice system as a whole. When all you consume is a 10-part series, and you go to the next 10-part series, and you go to the next 10-part series, and you look over the course of a year, and you've consumed 10-part series. You've consumed 10 trials that may have happened over the last 50 years, totally botched, totally screwed up, somebody like a police officer with a vengeance, a bad cop, whatever. It's really easy to let those things shift your bell curve, and suddenly you lose faith in everything. The bad guy always gets away. There's murderers around every corner, eating kids and murdering dogs or whatever. You say
I
something?
don't know anybody that's eating kids.
I know.
Just
I'm
so
trying
you know.
to be dramatic
But
for effect.
another thing, I have a cousin who is a prosecutor, has been for years, and she's talked about how the rise of true crime has made their jobs harder because people expect that we always called it the magic printer when we used to watch CSI.
Where's the mass spectrometer?
And and they think they know all these things now, and like, well, that's not real life. So juries think that they're more educated, and they're not, and it's making their jobs, prosecutors' jobs, harder because they don't have the evidence that you see on TV and in movies and those kind of things. Most of it because it's not real.
That technology doesn't exist.
They think you just put it in the computer and out, the
and
answer
goes,
pops. Yeah.
And
so it has definitely affected that because people think they know more.
Yes.
And they know just enough to be stupid.
And they know enough Hollywood to then look over at the police officers and say, y'all must be incompetent idiots. Or the prosecuting attorneys.
You should have done this. What about this? Yeah.
Right. So I am wholly, with all of my guts, not compelled by the literature that suggests there is no correlation between violent media and increases in all-cause violence. I also am going to expand violence. So if you tell me kids can play active shooter video games for 20 years and there's no increase in gun violence, cool. I don't believe that all-cause violence, meaning a body that is always heightened, a body that is anxious, a body that is depressed, a body that is a little bit sharper, a little bit louder, a little bit more antisocial, a little bit more isolated. I don't buy that, not even for a second. I'm wholly unconvinced by data that suggests there is no psychological toll or cost to mainlining this type of entertainment. I just don't buy it. It might not make more violent kids, but it might make them, as I said, more anxious, more depressed, more ADHD, more prone to isolating behavior, practicing of suicidal behavior. These correlative studies saying there are no problems are, in my opinion, they are highly misleading. I just don't buy them. Consuming and participating in violence is going to have an effect on the way you experience the world. Period. And listen, we know from other academic disciplines the importance and strength of behavioral models. A picture of new behavior alters our behavior. It gives our brains a new map to follow. It's why initiatives to increase diversity representation in media is so important. It changes our feelings and emotions and thoughts. It gives us a new model. Oh, somebody who looks like that could be an attorney. I've never seen that before. That's why those initiatives are so important. But those same media companies then come out and say, hey, all the violence that we put out here, that doesn't impact behavior at all. And these media companies talk out of both sides of their mouth. We need to provide new pictures so that we can give new people avenues for empathy, for behavior change. And that doesn't alter anything. It's not intellectually honest. And we know that when we watch the news over and over and over again, it makes us more anxious, more depressed, more angry, more rageful. Why in the world would we think it doesn't apply to us? So here's my 3 insights, and Kelly, you get the final rebuttal. Here we go. There's a shifting of the bell curve that happens. Most people don't personally know someone who's been kidnapped, beheaded, and murdered, or whatever happens in these podcasts. Now we have murder podcasts and horror movies, and we know so much more. I'm personally convinced after years of hanging out with police officers, veterans, and first responders that it shifts our bell curve into things that never happened, wouldn't even enter our mind, to things that happen all the time everywhere. And the data just doesn't bear that out. It makes our bodies more alert more of the time. Podcasts, this is number 2, podcasts are a new technology that affects us more than we know. We are overinformed and underexperienced. We have seen a million sex acts on TV. That's probably a little bit, that's probably a lot, but we've seen a lot. Yet the data tells me that fewer and fewer people are having intimacy in real life. We see so many violent acts on TV. Yet we have more and more parents who don't let their kids go to their grandparents' funerals because they don't want to bother them. They don't want to scare them. And so we've got kids who have seen countless murders and deaths on TV, but they've never been in a room and felt the weight of somebody in a casket over there and the grieving that's going on collectively. They've seen a lot of sexual activity on TV, and they've never wasted an entire movie reaching over trying to hold somebody's hand. So there's a disconnect between what I'm seeing and what my body's experiencing. And when it comes to podcasts, here's why this is so different for all of us. Historically speaking, to be in a room with Joe Rogan and listen to Joe talk to his 3 best friends about really deep and meandering topics, for all of human history, to be privy to that conversation, you had to be in that room. So we have bodies that have evolved over time to gather information in a multitude of ways: sound, smell, sight, touch, eye crinkles, head movement, shoulders up, shoulders down. All that stuff is data for us when we're having interactions and conversations. And now I can just put in my headphones and head on down the street or get on my mower and mow my yard or whatever. And I'm getting all of that insight into my mind, but I'm not there. That is changing the way our bodies interacts with the information that we get. It's all new. Is it necessarily bad? No, I'm not going to say that at all. That's one of the things we try to do on this show. We try to let you pull up a seat to a table with me and somebody who's struggling. That's the purpose of the show. But it's affecting us. It's affecting how our bodies express empathy. It's affecting how our bodies experience fear. It's affecting us in ways that we don't know yet. 3, and this is something that my dad told me. I'll never forget this. I was all into horror movies as a kid, up until my late 20s. I saw every movie that came out. I love scary movies. I liked interesting scary movies. I liked the way the cinematography, the way they scared people. I liked bad guys in those movies. I watched everything. And I'll never forget, my dad walked through one day, my dad, the homicide detective, and I was watching some horror movie on TV, and he just quietly said something, which was not like him. He quietly said, "I just can't ever imagine thinking this is entertainment." And he just walked on. And I remember being like, "Ooh, Dad, dropping the truth bombs on your little..." And then I started going into these homes myself. And so I'll just say this: the death and torture and murder of someone, the complete destruction of a family, I can't wrap my head around consuming that for entertainment. And that's just me. And so I know those stories exist. I know that there are people working through them. And from the journalistic endeavor, like what, Koenig did, Sarah did with Serial, there are journalistic stories that need to be told about injustice, about things that are going unseen, things happening in marginalized communities. All that's important. I don't know. It's tough for me to consume it as entertainment. I'll pass it on to Kelly for the final word. It'd be so funny if you were just like, "Go to hell, John."
No, all I'm going to say is, for those that can't see right now, those that are listening on podcast, John is wearing a shirt that says "The Killers." That's all I have.